I love the new Wolfenstein games. Machine Games have taken a classic and infused a tremendous amount of character, weighty gunplay and bombastic, and quite well done, satire into a series that had, before the New Order, been in decline. The new Colossus is one of my favourite games, upping the absurdity and political commentary well beyond its predecessor and somehow making it all work. But what happens when you take that formula, remove BJ Blazkowicz and replace him with his two offspring? That's what happens in this spin-off from the mainline story, similar to the Old Blood but with younger blood. It's co-op focused but can be played alone and, well, it grinds my gears a little. It's oozing with potential, like blood from a bullet hole in a Nazi skull, but in a lot of ways it feels like the game's feet have been stuck into blocks of cement and Terror Billy's daughters have been kicked off a pier to go and sleep with the fishes. Let me explain as I guide you through 8 of the best and worst things about Wolfenstein Youngblood. But first, thanks to Logitech G and the G432 7.1 surround sound gaming headset for sponsoring this video. To check out the tech behind the G432, click the link in the description. On a surface level, Youngblood gets a lot right. I have a bit of a soft spot for the neo-80s fad we're currently going through as a collective culture of people. It just so happens that, in Wolfenstein's timeline of events, Youngblood finding itself in an 80s Paris reimagined through a fascist lens makes a lot of sense. It absolutely leans into the time period too. The opening to the game, which takes place on a Zeppelin, features a neon-trimmed, synth-scored casino, complete with a checkerboard dance floor and an assortment of Nazified arcade classics. There's Nazi Worm, Nazi Frogger, and even Nazi Tetris. Perhaps the blocks only spin to the right. This aesthetic carries on throughout the whole game. The story, BJ going missing and the sisters finding a secret attic office in their house with clues to where he's gone, feels almost like a Spielberg movie. Reichfoot soldiers have boomboxes blasting out the latest synth hits from Decather, and a primary means of finding mission-critical information in the world involves you collecting floppy disks to decode on chunky computers with glowing red CRT monitors. I love this all so much, and I'd love a Fashintosh personal computer of my own, if I didn't think the Nazis were shit, obviously. For the first time in Machine Games' run with Wolfenstein, we don't actually find ourselves playing as BJ Blazkowicz. Jess and Soph, BJ's twin daughters, take the centre stage for Youngblood, now all grown up. The best way I can describe the so-called Terror twins is that they're like if Beavis and Butthead were Nazi killing machines in power suits. Another comparison I could make would be to the Kanker sisters in Ed, Edd n Eddy. Suffice to say, I think they are absolutely brilliant and I love them both with all my heart. The dynamic that exists between them feels really organic. They talk to each other exactly how sisters would talk to each other, they constantly goof around to the bemusement of the people around them, and their laugh is one of the best things ever rendered into digital audio. There's plenty of incidental dialogue between them as you explore the streets of Paris as well, which maintains that sibling chemistry throughout. Even if you opt to play solo with an AI-controlled sister, there's a great illusion of a living Nazi basher by your side. All in all, I care about Jess and Soph Blazkowicz, and I'm invested in their journey. Machine Games have gotten a lot of praise for the cinematography in their take on Wolfenstein. This very channel, in fact, did just that for Wolfenstein The New Order many moons ago, long before the time of the current team. That trend will continue with us, though. One of the things that I noticed when starting up Wolfenstein Youngblood for the first time was that its opening cutscene was packed full of symbolism and dramatic foreshadowing. There's clever use of lighting and colour, and the framing of shots convey a lot about the relationships between characters, and mate, there's so much I could go on about with these first few minutes alone that I'd have to make a whole video dedicated to it specifically. Maybe I will. Leave a comment if you'd fancy that. Machine Games as a studio are only one of a few that actually mess around with stuff like this in a very deliberate way, and I am 100% here for it.
For another way in.
One of the most exciting things about Youngblood for many is that Arkane Studios, the much-loved developers of Dishonored and the 2017 reboot of Prey, are coming on board to help Machine Games with the level design. It's one of the things that my boss and video dad Matthew hoped to see more of when discussing his thoughts on the preview he got his hands on. Machine Games handled the first 2 areas of the game, which are more linear tutorial levels, so I'm pleased to confirm that Arkane's signature is all over much of the game beyond that point. The different districts of Paris each operate as their own miniature open worlds, and they're 2 very Arkane things, dense and vertical. Every single district tells its own story through the set design, like the shanty town built around a security barrier in Detention Centre 4, the gut-twistingly high scaffolding on Brother 2, and this Nazi frat den I stumbled across. And there's as much exploring upwards as there is left and right, like all of these balconies, which, if you find a discreet way of jumping up to, allow you to snipe, pinpoint targets, and even leap from rooftop to rooftop. Here's the thing though, a lot of that really quite fantastic level design feels wasted in the way that Youngblood plays. There's a double jump granted to you by your power suit right from the get-go that makes ascending through areas a bit easier, but climbing feels clunky. Sometimes I'll run and jump to try and make it up onto a ledge, and despite being in a perfect position to grab on and hoist myself the rest of the way up, I drop down to the mercy of the Nazis below because that ledge wasn't precisely knee height or something. Another time I came across a very obvious balcony for sniping and tried to make my way up to it, but the only way I could was if I very carefully jumped up onto a really thin wall lamp and edged myself ever so slightly here or there until I could just barely and awkwardly make the jump. It makes exploring everything there is to see, which I really want to do, feel a bit sluggish. Compare it to the acrobatic experimentation of Dishonored, or the scenery vaulting fury of Bethesda's Fellow, Doom, or Rage, and you just don't feel like a hero naturally equipped for the playground built for them. As well as a movement system better suited to Arkane's level design, there are a number of other apparent holes in Wolfenstein Youngblood where it feels like certain things should be. It's never been a feature in previous games, but given the widened opportunity from that level design, not being able to pick up and hide the corpses of your Nazi foes feels like a huge oversight and makes a hardcore stealth run of the game painfully difficult to the point of dissatisfaction. There are a few other little details that contribute to this difficulty. You only have a minimap and no larger map with which to plan out routes, stealth damage bonuses don't feel as big as they should be at times, but this whole corpse problem really does have a huge and detrimental impact on stealth. Like the games before Youngblood, it feels like something you only do at the beginning of an engagement to pick off tougher targets before going in guns blazing, but with how different environments are here, that doesn't suffice. The game tells you if you've successfully made it through an area without setting off an alarm, but because of all of this, I didn't see it often, and when I did, it's because I popped on my cloak and just sprinted to the exit. Similarly, while I get the sense that it's bare bones in an attempt to preserve the core Wolfenstein feel, there are a number of ways in which the co-op, one of the biggest features of the game, doesn't quite work. There's a bit of a disconnect between the two players. Every item in the game is instanced for that specific player, and it doesn't inform you if your co-op partner has picked up something relevant to the mission or not, meaning a lot of me opening a chest with some silver coins in it and standing around while my partner plays catch-up to find it too. There are pep gestures that each sister can use to buff the other in a variety of ways too, but this feels less like co-op and more like an invisible button prompt. Rejigging it so that loot pickups are just shared, and perhaps even adding a few extra co-op elements here or there, feels like it could be, quite easily, a much better game. Hell, that inability to pick up bodies? For some of the larger, hulking Nazi super soldiers, Machine Games could even have implemented a mechanic where you and your friend drag their corpses both at once, in order to shift them behind a bin. That's just an off-the-cuff idea, really. What I'm trying to say is, it feels like lots of little ideas are underexplored in Youngblood, and I find myself wishing Arkane Studios had helped out with more than just the level design. One of the best things about Machine Games' Wolfenstein is how meaty and heavy and impactful using your weapons feel. From a technical standpoint, the guns in Youngblood are just as good, if with a few more interesting attachment options and now weapon skins. But enemies in Youngblood, as a means of compensating for having two players on the battlefield, are a lot spongier. To a certain extent that makes sense. The problem is that it completely changes how the guns you use operate in the world. In the New Order and the New Colossus, weapons felt powerful because a few bullets here or there would knock back, incinerate, and explode the heads of the Nazis you fought in seconds, sometimes instantly with a well-placed shot. But in Youngblood, one foot soldier that I came across literally took 10 heavy rounds to the face from an assault rifle configured as a sniper, with the bonus damage granted from stealth, and still didn't die. It's an issue I ran into with a lot of encounters. The weapons in machine games as Wolfenstein feel good in large part because of how lethal they are, and in Youngblood they feel like diesel punk paintball guns. Very flashy, very chunky, not very lethal at all. Another feature introduced to make co-op work is the health bars that appear above Nazis' heads, telling you how much health they have, how much armour they're wearing, and what the most effective ammunition type against the armour is. I understand why this has been added. It helps in deciding which one of you engages which target, but it ended up making it feel less like I was spraying bullets into fascist foot soldiers, and more like I was draining a meter. You can't even turn them off, because that armour indicator can become essential in knowing how you need to be approaching a fight. My eyes became transfixed on these bars and these icons until it almost felt like I had Nazi face blindness. Which sucks, because I want to be able to look into this f***er's eyes when his head explodes. What drew me so strongly to this new iteration of Wolfenstein overall was the story that it had to tell. Exploring an alternate timeline where the Nazis won in such an over-the-top but charming and sometimes even earnest way meant there was a lot of potential for some excellent commentary. Machine Games even added some emotional drama to BJ Blazkowicz's story that transformed him from a mass-murdering meathead into quite a human person. The New Colossus' story, the places it took us to, and the ridiculous yet lovable characters it introduced to us were deeply compelling and kept pulling me further and further through the game to its very end. Remember earlier how I waxed lyrical about Youngblood's cinematography, how I gushed about Jess and Soph? Here's the thing. Once I reached the catacombs where the Paris Resistance resides and where you operate from as a hub, I very quickly forgot that there was a story at all. No cutscenes, no quests that feel like they're pushing the narrative, just an underground hub world with flat NPCs that send you on fetch quests to the different Paris districts. There are big missions, like the raids on 3 big Nazi bases of operations, Brothers 1, 2 and 3, but even with these there isn't anything keeping you invested in the story. No cutscenes about each, nor in between, and they all have boss fights at the end that, while aesthetically different, are laid out the same, with a big central room where a giant robot emerges from the floor, and 2 wings to the left and right, each containing a Nazi Uber commander, each with a key that you both put into a machine. There are more cinematic sequences later in the game, but it's no substitute for those lengthy in-game moments in the earlier games where you'd witness amazing villain monologues or head-spinning twists from BJ's perspectives. A cost of the game becoming co-op, probably, but it leaves the game feeling more narratively barren. Oh, and there are daily and weekly quests. There's a premium currency too, not yet available or labelled, but it looks like it'll probably be Nazi gold, which you can use to buy weapon and armour skins for whatever reason. Combined with the big red health bars, a lack of any proper storytelling compared to the other games in the series, and quests that amount to go to the place, kill lots of dudes, kill the bigger, scarier dude and come back, it all feels a bit like Destiny, or an MMO generally, which is a crying shame, because that little hint of what we got at the beginning of the game seems to have set up something a lot more story-driven and a lot less live service than what we have. Wolfenstein Youngblood makes me a little bit sad, really. On the surface, it has everything I want in a game. A radical 80s aesthetic, an open-ended but not too overwhelmingly expansive world, this bloke with a communist mask, and pile upon pile of Nazi scum to slaughter. But it just hasn't grabbed me in the way that I hoped or expected it to. Arkane were on board. There was a lot of potential with the setting, the story, the co-op mechanics, but it's missing something. A lot of little things. And that's holding it back from being the incredibly special thing that it could have been. Thanks again to Logitech G6 for sponsoring this video. Featuring 50mm audio drivers, a 6mm mic and DTS Headphone X 2.0 surround sound technology under the hood, the G432 headset immerses you in the action and ensures you'll always be heard for a complete gaming experience. Find out how to order yours by following the link in the description below. If you have any questions about Wolfenstein Youngblood, do pop them in the comments, I'd be happy to answer them. And if you haven't already, you could like this video if you found it useful, and subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun if you fancy seeing more stuff like this. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you again soon.